Mbeumo and Amad clash on the right side because they both want to make the same runs into the same areas, receiving the ball in the same areas, and essentially doing the same thing when they have the ball at their feet. And so whilst it isn't every single time, at least a significant proportion of the time, it seems like one of them is closing off the space for the other one to make a run into, thereby restricting both players' effectiveness. And so this leads me to raising the question that I raised at the start of the summer when we initially signed Mbeumo. Why are we spending £65 million on a player who predominantly plays from the right side of a front three, whose game mirrors Amad, who's going to be playing at right wing back? Well, in this video I'm going to be breaking down exactly why this stylistic combination leads to United's ball progression down the right side being suboptimal, whilst also showing you a tactical solution to the problem, showing how even with Mbeumo ahead of Amad at right wing back, greater tactical creativity, flexibility and development of coordinated patterns of play could allow Amorim to make slight enhancements to the system that significantly improve our ability to progress the ball down that right side into the final third. Before I then explain why for nearly half the price United could have had a better stylistic fit in that role, who stylistically would have complemented Amad, not restricted him, and it is a player that I mentioned at the start of the summer as my initial preferred option to Mbeumo. And so by the end of the video you're going to see that despite the stylistic balance being off on that right side, this should only require an evolvement of Amorim's current system, not having to completely rip up the system and start again. And so the solution is definitely within the coach's hands without even having to switch system. But before I come on to that, if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, then go over to jerseyfifa.co. They've got a variety of new season and retro jerseys, including the new season Manchester United shirts. They sent me over this Bruno Fernandes home shirt from this season, alongside two of their retro shirts as well. This Manchester United 06-07 white away shirt with Ronaldo 7 on the back, alongside this Zidane Juventus shirt from the 1990s as well. If you use code Atlantis at checkout you'll get a 10% discount, so I'll leave it linked in the description and in the comments section below. So as I pointed out at the start of the window in numerous of my Who Manchester United Should Sign videos, my transfer strategy going into the summer, my preferred transfer strategy would have been that after spending £62 million on Cunha, rather than dropping another £65 million as a fixed transfer fee and a £7.8 million salary on Mbeumo, we would have been far better off cutting that transfer fee into two, and using that money to sign a left wing back such as Theo Hernandez, who was available for about £20 million at that point, or a younger option such as Diego Moreira for around £25 million, alongside a cheaper alternative to Mbeumo, who I think would have been a much better stylistic fit, not just for the system but for Amad in particular, and that player would have been Canning Lee, who I reckon we could have got for around £35 million plus some add-ons. Now if you judge solely on glancing at a player's recent history, then yes, Mbeumo looks significantly more impressive than Canning Lee, but from the eye test and statistically over the last few seasons, I actually think on current ability Mbeumo is closer to Canning Lee's level than he is to someone like Matheus Cunha, which is why I wouldn't have paid more than £45 million for him. However, that wouldn't have been the main reason, as I still persist with the theory that Amad and Mbeumo on the right side together is not optimal for either player from a stylistic point of view. See, in the first two games of the season, there's been a few situations where one of Mbeumo or Amad has received the ball on the right flank in the final third, and the other one just seems uncomfortable, being forced to make an under or an overlapping run, but due to both players being left footers who primarily want to be cutting inside to deliver a cross or a pass into the box, with neither being as effective going down the outside on their right, they just don't look like they have the chemistry or are on the same wavelength. And even though I will admit that it's only 180 minutes into the season, even 6 months down the line, I can't see how both players wouldn't benefit from having a right footer like Mason Mount or Diego Dalot either ahead or behind them. And this clip can be used as a perfect example of how Mbeumo and Amad's natural offensive tendencies conflict. United work the ball down the interior channel on the left side of the middle third, with Mount connecting the play incredibly efficiently with Cunha and Bruno Fernandes on multiple occasions in this game, specifically when he's moving from that half-space position towards Luke Shaw in possession, which first allows him to drag Tete high and out of the back line, and then he's able to link the play with a first-time flick or pass, as he does here. And this piece of play was incredibly efficient, but the issue comes after Cunha has successfully turned on the inside of Anderson, You can see that both Mbeumo and Ahmad are positioned on the outside of Ryan Sessegnon, with Mbeumo blocking Ahmad's run into the channel, leaving Cunha without a shorter passing option into the right-sided half space, forcing him to hold on to the ball longer than ideal, inviting the pressure, and the attack eventually breaking down. Is this sort of situation where I say more of a midfield playmaker such as Kang-in Lee would have been more beneficial for the stylistic balance of the system, particularly for Ahmad at right wing back, as Mbeumo at Brentford was very much a winger or a wide forward, who primarily wanted to run in behind the defender, either centrally into the channel, or a diagonal run into a central position from a starting position on the outside of the fullback, rather than drifting infield early on in play and receiving the ball in tight areas between the lines. And so especially with a centre forward such as Benjamin Sesko, who in general you want holding a higher position between the two centre backs, providing the movement in behind between the two centre backs and between the centre backs and full backs, you want both interior forwards on either side to be highly comfortable in tight, congested central areas, which neither Mbeumo or Ahmad excel in, being more natural wingers compared to more midfield playmakers such as Kang-in Lee, Bruno Fernandes or Kobbie Mainoo in that interior forward role. And this is why, to me, United's transfer strategy this summer just didn't make coherent sense, as if they wanted to sign an interior forward who was primarily reliant on runs in behind, and being more of a natural winger than Cunha, who could receive the ball on the outside of the fullback in wide positions, rather than centrally between the lines. It would have made far more sense to bring in someone who could do that from the left side, such as Antoine Semenyo, Ademola Lookman or Rafael Leao, as stylistically that would have offered far more balance to the system. Definitely the type of interior forward in the front for Ahmad on the other side, as whilst Ahmad at right wing back in possession in the opposition's half wants to be receiving possession and making runs from the same area that he would playing as a natural winger in a back four system. Alternatively could use Dorgu's resulting powerful under or overlapping run as a decoy to cut inside, looking to work a passing, shooting or crossing angle, or even alternatively just to find Dorgu's run in behind the back line, getting him into a low crossing position. However, on a more positive note, despite Ahmad and Mbeumo on the same side not exactly being ideal stylistically, Amorim could still make the duo significantly more effective at progressing the ball forward down the right side. He would just need to evolve his coordinated patterns of play further. Here we see Fulham's 5-3-2 defensive shape in the middle third, resembling a similar shape to the one we see United take up in this phase of play, just with greater flexibility between the midfield and forward lines and greater central coverage. However, the narrow defensive shape that Fulham are using does mean that there will be space wide of Iwobi and Lukic, when the wing-backs Ahmad and Dorgu are able to positionally pin Sessegnon and Castagna deep with their high positioning. From here, De Ligt shifts the ball out to Yoro, who is efficient with getting the ball out of his feet, and going down the line to Ahmad, whose deeper movement towards the ball works to drag Sessegnon high and out of the back line. Now from here, Ahmad's going to look to bounce the ball back inside to Casemiro, whilst Mbeumo can now take advantage of the space Sessegnon has vacated by making a run on the outside of Bassi into the channel. However, when watching United in the middle third and also when they're being pressed high in their defensive third, we seem to resort to low probability longer direct passes into the forward line, specifically in behind the back line when we're in the middle third, far too frequently and early on in the move. I think in these situations we need to be far more intentional with playing through the centre of the pitch, connecting and progressing the attack with a series of higher probability shorter passes that can then enable us to manipulate the opposition's defensive and midfield lines in order to maximise the space between those lines, then having players receive the ball in these areas having made forward or diagonal runs into the space, rather than standing there statically receiving the ball with their back to goal under immediate pressure, as we routinely see with Mbeumo and Mount when they receive the ball in these positions, and the angle at which they're receiving the ball means that on their first touch, they're immediately being forced away rather than towards goal. Now in this situation, whilst it could be beneficial for Mbeumo to make a movement towards the ball, not only offering Casemiro with an immediate midfield splitting pass into the half space, but also causing Calvin Bassey a positional dilemma. If he holds a position in the back line, then Mbeumo becomes a free man, but if he follows him high, now he's completely opened up the left side of Fulham's back line for Ahmad to then make a third man run into from deep, already having run off Sessegnon and got goal side. However, Mbeumo's movement in behind does mean that Casemiro has to almost immediately look for that long direct pass in order to release Mbeumo down the channel, which if it had come off, could have allowed Mbeumo to isolate Bassi in a 1v1, pushing him backwards into the box. But this is a low probability pass, Low probability of even reaching Mbeumo, let alone reaching him and him being able to turn and face up Bassey in a 1v1. Now ideally this comes from the manager's ball progression strategy. I think it should be drummed into the United players' heads that in this area of the pitch, when the ball gets worked down the right or even the left side, they need to be looking to progress the ball centrally via a series of shorter passes in order to exploit the space that's created by Mbeumo spinning and dragging Bassey deep, with Sessegnon already having been caught high and the space between the central midfielders and centre-backs on that side having become stretched. I think Amorim has to be instructing the central midfielder on the other side of the double pivot, Bruno Fernandes in this example, to be immediately looking to break off his designated presser and move closer to Casemiro in order to reduce the passing distance between them and open up the possibility of Casemiro playing the square pass inside, Amad continuing his run goal side of Sessegnon and Sander Berg, to then receive a reverse midfield splitting pass from Bruno, wherefrom rather than receiving the ball statically with his back to goal under immediate pressure, he is now running onto the ball with the fullback behind and Mount and Mbeumo providing forward runs in behind Anderson centrally and down the outside of Bassey, forcing them to either retreat to track the runs, but affording Amad the space to carry the ball into the final third in the process, where he's now in that zone 14 area on the edge of the box, where he can look to work a shooting angle. If one of the centre-backs does engage, they'd have to leave one of Mbeumo or Mount, opening up the opportunity for Amad to slide one of them into a high-value shooting position. However, without these higher volume, shorter passing sequences, Casemiro is forced into a longer, more direct pass. But Bassey is more than comfortable defending in these kind of situations, tracking Mbeumo's run, and his defensive intelligence, pace and composed physicality enables him to get to the ball first, and United's attack breaks down before we've even reached the final third. And so in conclusion, Mbeumo and Amad clash not because they lack individual quality, but because their stylistic profiles are just too similar. Both want to operate as natural wingers on the outside of the fullback, providing movement in behind, rather than drifting into central, more congested areas, whilst also always wanting to cut back inside onto their stronger left foot, with neither being as comfortable as someone like a Frimpong, for example, when providing overlapping runs down the outside, receiving the ball on their right foot. Although whilst at the moment Amorim isn't providing those tactical solutions, with more developed coordinated patterns of play on that right side, he could still make Mbeumo and Amad significantly more effective when it comes to progressing the ball down the right side. But even still, this obvious stylistic clash which I talked about at the start of the summer, particularly that we signed a player like this on the right side rather than on the left, does leave me with significant concerns for United's transfer strategy going into 2026. So let me know what you thought of this analysis in the comment section below. And if you want to check out any cheap, good quality football jerseys, go over to jerseyfever.co. You can use code Atlantis at checkout for a 10% discount, so I'll leave a link in the description and in the comment section below. And you can also check out my Patreon and get a 7-day free trial, so I'll leave that linked on the end screen now as well.